Now they did take their time, but finally the characters for the next version have officially been drip marketed, and a little surprise, Orphie and Magus alongside Seed have been revealed to be the new featured S-rank characters as expected, since they did show up near the end of the 2.1 story event. As usual, their designs do look great, and considering they are from Obol Squad, it does mean we can possibly expect unique and fun playstyles similar to other Obol Squad members. However, given Alice is yet to release and will also be an amazing anomaly DPS available to pick up just before Orphie and Seed, there likely would be some uncertainty with who you may want to prioritize. So in typical fashion, I'll be going over the kid potential both Orphie and Seed hold, their team versatility and compositions to consider, then I'll be wrapping it up with their overall value and who exactly should you prioritize between the upcoming banners. As always, if you are interested in more ZenlessZoneZero content, would very much appreciate it if you could subscribe and drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Kicking this off with the first character dropping in version 2.2, the Firefly of Zenless, otherwise known as Seed, will be releasing as our newest Electro attacker, which is a bit unexpected since that does mean she will be competing with not only Harumasa but also Soldier Anby. Now it's not so bad for Harumasa when considering he was given for free, but for Soldier Anby that released not too long ago and shares the exact same role, attribute and faction as Seed would of course be a bit concerning for both characters. However, I guess that would only mean that both Seed and Anby will be quite different to each other, just so players that do decide to pick up both characters will be able to still utilize both in different situations. So with that being the case, and considering Anby is more of a combo attacker that requires a lot of field time, it would be reasonable to then expect for Seed to be more of a burst damage dealer and for her to require hardly any field time in comparison to deal top tier damage. Although, given Seed is also part of Obol Squad, I would expect for there to be some relation to the aftershock mechanic to still be part of her kit. So whether that will mean she can deal aftershock damage herself or enhance the damage dealt from aftershock, or even have an ability triggered from aftershock damage dealt from allies is quite possible. In addition, it goes without saying that Seed will have a very unique playstyle given she is in a mech, which means there could be some first person abilities from within the armor similar to what was shown within the drip marketing, but I wouldn't expect that to be for long since it will be difficult to dodge attacks from other directions. On top of that, given Seed is using the mech for combat and as we have seen can fire from range, it does hint at the fact that she will primarily be dealing damage from range and wouldn't need to be going up close similar to Soldier Anby, which ultimately provides a bit more safety during combat and to have a bit more time to avoid lethal attacks. Lastly, I'm sure there will be some sort of buffing capabilities for herself to increase the damage she deals, opposed to Soldier Anby that is able to buff the aftershock damage dealt from all allies. So essentially, with having potential to deal massive amounts of burst damage as an attacker, whilst also being a bit more greedy and buffing her own damage and having a fun playstyle as she will be utilizing a huge mech during combat, Seed certainly has potential to turn out as a great electric attacker and most likely will be quite unique in order to exist alongside Soldier Anby. Now as for her team versatility, it's pretty obvious that Seed will be able to synergize with other Obol Squad members and perhaps instead of replacing Anby, there is a good chance for those two to synergize together, but only if Seed doesn't require much field time. If so, then a composition consisting of Soldier Anby, Seed and Trigger could work very well and allow for the overall DPS to compete with some of the top meta compositions. Currently, Soldier Anby doesn't really deal as much damage as some other damage dealers and overall seems to lack the firepower to compete. But that might just be due to the fact Soldier Anby was never intended to be a hypercarry and would be optimal when played alongside another DPS. Even more so with the fact that Soldier Anby does increase the aftershock damage dealt by allies by 25% through her additional ability, which does hint towards the perfect composition consisting of multiple DPS characters able to deal damage whilst providing utility to each other. Additionally, with Trigger being able to increase the damage dealt to enemies by 35% when dealing aftershock attacks, she does seem better suited for dual DPS compositions where multiple characters can take advantage of that damage buff. So in essence, Soldier, Anby, Seed, and Trigger will definitely be a solid team to consider and likely will be one of the best compositions for Seed. Alternatively, it's fair to expect for some other characters such as Yanagi, Qingyi, Pulchra, and Rina to work quite well. Although, just bear in mind those characters would only work depending on whether you can fulfill Seed's requirements for her core passive. Lastly, there would be some other attackers such as Evelyn, Ellen, and Soldier 11 that can utilize Seed as a secondary DPS. But of course, that will rely on Seed being more of a burst damage dealer and to provide the other attackers with more field time. So overall, there is some flexibility when it comes to Seed's compositions, but the main compositions to focus on would essentially be those that do consist of other members of Obol Squad. Moving on to arguably the most anticipated character next update, Orphie and Magus will be releasing within the second phase and has had quite a bit of attention since their initial reveal prior to version 2.0. Now they have been confirmed to be our newest fire attacker, which at first could be a bit of an issue for those that do already have Evelyn, considering she still does remain to be an absolute powerhouse of a fire attacker and is able to clear majority of content without much difficulty, leading to Orphie and Magus not being able to provide much value to your account, since to be better than Evelyn would be asking for a lot. So with that being the case, it would be reasonable to believe instead of being a main DPS similar to Evelyn that requires a lot of field time, Orphie and Magus could be more like a sub DPS and would essentially be considered as an attacker version of Burnice. Only then would it be fair to have both Evelyn and Orphie on your account, since then they would be capable of different things and would fit into different compositions. So then, with being a sub DPS, it does mean there is a good chance they will be capable of dealing great burst damage and wouldn't require much field time in comparison to a main DPS. In addition, it's reasonable to even expect for there to be some off-field damage capabilities, and especially since she is part of Obol Squad, but also for there to be a considerable difference between her and Seed's abilities. So taking into consideration those factors alone, Orphie does have incredible potential as she will be flexible to play alongside various main DPS characters, whilst also being able to deal solid damage on field and off field. Though as the cherry on top, given other sub DPS characters such as Yanagi and Vivian can increase the damage delta in their own way for their allies, it would then be a possibility for some sort of damage increase, attack increase, or perhaps even an additional bonus towards aftershock damage to be part of Orphie's kit. Especially since, like other support characters that do tend to have a partner with them, Orphie does come with Magus, which does hint at the possibility they will work quite similar and have supportive capabilities. So all in all, there will certainly be a lot of value within Orphie's kit, and especially since if she does end up becoming a sub DPS, it does mean she will hold much more long-term value than many other DPS characters. Now, even though Orphie will be a sub DPS that should technically synergize with quite a few characters, there likely will be a premium composition where she does work best, and once again, since she is part of the Obol Squad, it would give reason to believe she will synergize the most when alongside characters such as Silver Soldier, Anby, Trigger, and Seed. Trigger would of course remain to be the staple within every Obol Squad composition, since she is currently the only character that isn't an attacker, but for the other two positions, it will essentially be a mixture of Seed, Soldier, Anby, and Orphie. Now with that said, considering Orphie might be more of a supportive DPS in comparison to Seed, her damage might not be that high, but since she is potentially providing buffs for the rest of the team, she would be considered as an amazing asset for the team on release, and even more so long term. So essentially, just like one of Seed's best compositions, Soldier, Anby, Orphie, and Trigger are most likely going to be an amazing composition to utilize. Though with that said, Seed, Orphie, and Trigger will also be a great composition, and judging based off previous version updates, it might very well be the strongest composition for both Seed and Orphie as they are releasing together. Now aside from the Obol composition in specific, there would of course be a few other characters such as Soldier 11, Evelyn, and perhaps even Ellen that have potential to synergize with Orphie, considering each of them do require a lot of field time and would significantly benefit from being paired with a sub DPS that deals considerable damage within little field time. So as of now, there are a handful of synergies that are viable for Orphie and Magus. But just like Seed, it does seem like a full Obel squad composition may be where you would be able to fully utilize them at their best. Overall, the upcoming banners do seem to hold quite a bit of value, considering there is Alice that will be dropping sooner than others and is a powerful anomaly DPS. But then there is also Orphie and Magus as our first attacker sub DPS, which potentially can deal damage off field, provides damage buffs to allies whilst also dealing great burst damage. Then lastly there's Seed, which is our newest electro attacker that can potentially deal great burst damage herself, whilst also having a very unique playstyle utilizing a giant mech during combat. Now all in all, both characters seem like they will work incredibly well with each other and may just be the best in slot for each other's premium compositions, which pretty much means you may need to pull both characters in order to see the true value of each character, and especially if you don't already have Soldier Anby as an alternative. However, if you are limited with your pulls, which I expect most of you are from the first phase of the current version, as usual, who to prioritize will depend on your own account and the characters you do already have. But considering long-term value, without a doubt, Orphie and Magus would hold the most when considering they are most likely going to be a sub-DPS. So just like other sub-DPS characters such as Yanagi, Burnice and Vivian for the anomaly meta, Orphie will certainly be able to show similar value to the amount they hold and perhaps even more due to simply being a newer character. So Orphie does hold more longevity than Seed simply due to potentially providing some support whilst dealing solid DPS or field. But it doesn't take away from the fact Seed will still definitely be a great electric DPS herself with massive damage dealing potential. However, more important than anything, their value would of course alter depending on whether you do have the characters that can synergize well with them. In other words, if you perhaps don't have other members of the Obel squad in specific, then they wouldn't hold as much value as they would if you were to have the characters that can utilize their kits at max potential. Then as for where Alice stands, in terms of longevity and overall value, she certainly holds more than Seed due to being an anomaly DPS. Alongside the fact every player that was active in version 1.4 already has an S-rank electric attacker for free. Also, considering Soldier Anby did release in version 1.6 whereas Jane released in version 1.1, it does mean you would be gaining more value upgrading to Alice from Jane than to Seed from either Soldier Anby or Harumasa. Although, whether you would even consider Alice will depend on if you do have other anomaly characters such as Yanagi, Vivian and Yuzuha to support her. If so, then Alice will be an incredible DPS that can deal insane burst damage quite consistently. So as mentioned, it will just depend on whether you do have the necessary characters to build a solid team for the upcoming characters, or if you have enough funds to pull the characters they will need to be utilized at their best. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Would really appreciate it if you could subscribe for more ZenlessZoneZero content, and if you enjoyed the video, drop a like. Also, drop a comment down below on whether you will be picking up anyone from the upcoming banners or are you skipping. And yeah, hope to catch you guys later.